is Mike Alexander. He's the director of the Center for Livable Communities at the Atlanta Regional Commission. The center integrates various aspects of physical planning and data resources to achieve a greater balance of consideration for each area in the Commission's plans and programs. So the activities undertaken by the center include development and maintenance of the region's long-term development plans and functional plans, including this LCI program. Prior to joining ARC, Mike worked in Alabama, South Carolina, and Georgia, and he has got dual master's degrees in public administration and community planning from Auburn. He is also an ex-Marine. Let me go ahead and ask Mike's first question, and then I will introduce the other panelists as we get them going. Mike, the Center for Livable Communities tracks trends of employment and population in the region. Forbes magazine has recently rated Atlanta in the top 5 regions for technology in the country, and we've seen frequent recent headlines about tech relocations into the core of the region. So what's going on with this? Why is creative technology hot in the region first, and then why is the core the center of gravity for that type of activity?
Well, that's a great question. Thank you for providing it to me ahead of time.
Teeing you up.
Teeing me up. I am the director of the Center for Livable Communities, and that is most of the planning function of ARC. But last year I was promoted into that position. For the previous 9 years, I was actually the head of research at the ARC. And I've invested a lot of that time in trying to understand economic development. I've had some unique opportunities as a result of that position that I think are absolutely relevant to the conversation tonight. I spent 2 weeks at Mercedes headquarters in New Jersey in January, and it was very clear why you might want to go south. The best indicator of a region's growth potential over the last 35 years is actually mean temperature in January. Right, and Scott and I, we both use this joke. The best thing that ever happened to the South was air conditioning, right? Because it made the South habitable for economic development. It's been a boon. As we've watched these companies move into Metro Atlanta, though, there are other things that I've also gotten to be a party to. I got to go out to Phoenix, Arizona, to meet with specialists that actually specialize in labor supply, and they provide that consulting information to businesses when they are thinking about relocating. The first question they ask actually is, what's your retention rate at Georgia Tech? Because what they're really after is access to high quality labor, talent. Talent is very, very critical to a business. A place like Mercedes, a company like Mercedes, when they relocate, they are moving to a place that they want to feel sure that they're going to have a lot of employees to fill their demand for that labor. In Mercedes' case, what was so interesting is they wanted to get to a younger market, right? And they were trying to change Mercedes and really have a break in their own organizational structure. And we see that again and again in the companies that move to Metro Atlanta. Coming back to the Georgia Tech thing about that retention rate, Georgia Tech, it can't be underestimated how much their high-tech presence has influenced, in particular, the development of Midtown. But it is absolutely spilling over in ways that, truthfully, as planners, we really didn't anticipate. That retention rate for Georgia Tech, they will tell you it's 72%. 72% of the Georgia Tech graduates actually stay in Metro Atlanta, because that's very much an economic development weapon that they use to say you're going to have this strong labor supply available to you if you're going to move into this concentrated area now around 5th Street where all of these tech companies are really moving. It is amazing to think about NCR relocating to Gwinnett County and then deciding to move into Midtown because they want to get at the heart of what is this real energy. And if you went over there and the Honeywells and the AT&Ts, they're all focused on making sure that they're around the best talent available, and Georgia Tech really exemplifies that potential for them, right? And the spillover effect is we start to see a place like Ponce City Market, which I think we're going to talk a little bit tonight. The rents obviously at Ponce City Market are through the roof. And as someone who tracks office supply, there's some just givens that we're really starting to challenge. The orthodoxy around where office buildings can go up has changed. And I think it's changed in no small part because of a recognition of all the things that Scott really already talked about, right? That people want to be in these high quality spaces. So you gotta have the access to the talent pool, and we have that in Metro Atlanta. And that talent pool can live anywhere. And they want to be in those high quality spaces. So if you go ask Green Street Properties, who has most of a big part of the space at Ponce City Market, where their workers are coming from, they're gonna say here, actually, right? And we thought we'd run these north-south buses up north and it would serve the office workers there, but actually the office workers, if you poll them, are very much coming from this area because this area is so popular. And it's continuing to spill over. So what's happened is there's an office building under construction beside Ponce City Market. I'll just be frank with you, that blows my mind. That we're gonna do a real office building off of the Peachtree spine shows the level of demand. And we can truthfully think that it's very reasonable to propose office at the Bass property now because we're seeing the market take hold of it. And we're at the highest rents in Metro Atlanta right now. Ponce City Market. And to really fill that story out, when we saw that development first proposed, we thought it would be all retail. It has a lot of retail, but that's not what's really driving the space usage. It's that office demand. So it's very, very interesting for us. Metro Atlanta is a leader. We're consistently among the largest metros in the top 3 in year-over-year job change as a percentage. We have been for 2 years, right? We've been adding a lot of high-wage jobs, and that's exemplified by the NCRs and the Mercedes-Benzes. We've also been adding a lot of low-wage jobs as well, right? We are under-supplying housing in Metro Atlanta. We have an affordability problem now in the city, and it's very, very serious. There's a diversity of housing here, but on the east side of the city, but generally speaking, it's relatively unaffordable. And if you asked about the affordable rental units that are new construction in the city, I would tell you they're not being built at all. And Ponce City Market once again shows that. They had an opportunity to use tax credits to do some affordable housing. They opted to not do that, right? So this is very much a part of this conversation that we need to be having about what the future of this place is going to be. So
Thank you, Matt.
I think that's the answer to the first question.
It was indeed. And well, let's talk a little bit more about Ponce City Market. Aileen Almassey is Managing Director of Cushman Wakefield in Atlanta. She's a 19-year veteran of commercial real estate and has extensive experience in leasing and management of Class A office properties. She's been focused on landlord representation, and her current role as leasing director, she's responsible for leading Cushman & Wakefield's Atlanta agency leasing practice and marketing for several office buildings throughout Metro Atlanta. Among her recent responsibilities was the lease up of Ponce City Market. Aileen, when you guided the lease up of Ponce City Market, I mean, it was a Class A, well, it was an office space, it was off the Peachtree spine, and it was in a converted warehouse. And yet it's become a tech hub in almost a single tenant cycle. What did you learn about your tenants as they chose Ponce City Market? What were their key decision criteria?
Sure. Thanks for having me today. Ponce City Market obviously has gotten a lot of news. If you have a Google alert on it, you'll get pinged a few times a day. It's been overwhelmingly successful, and I'd say a lot of people's surprise, 16 acres of what was really a blighted area in the four corners of Midtown, Ponce Highlands, Virginia Highlands, Old Fourth Ward. And from like the everyday office broker, which if you want to stereotype them, it would look like a 40-ish white male that lives in Buckhead. They certainly did not see what the offering and the appeal that was kind of being brought out to the market with Pond City Market. And I kind of really, my hat's off to Jamestown for having the vision to do something and be able to execute it in the manner that they were able to, because I think a lot of other developers would have been so bottom line focused, and frankly the $50+ rents for office wouldn't have made it into anyone's pro forma if you turn back the clock to 2010. So really kind of the market dictated how the development turned out. We originally started with 350,000 square feet of office at that property, and now we leased the last direct space of 557,000 square feet of office. So that's a considerable increase. And that was kind of the optionality that was afforded by having a huge warehouse and having a plan to do multifamily as well as retail and office and what other kind of ancillary uses the space could be used for. The tenants and the people that really understood the offering, many of them lived in the community and understood how the Beltline was transforming Atlanta before it was paved. This was, before the 2 million visitors that we had on it last year. So that's been remarkable and really fun to be a part of. There's been, certainly the depth of talent. As Mike mentioned, we've seen a huge urbanization into Buckhead, Midtown, and downtown. It's about 2.4 million square feet that we've seen come from the suburbs into the urban core of Atlanta in the last 24 months. And then you couple that with the new jobs that have been reported, so the Honeywells and the Anthems and the new jobs. Athena Health has new jobs as well. That's really the demand, and that's all about the talent. And if you ask any of these decision makers, the top 1 to 5 concerns are about talent and about recruitment and about retention. So that's a lot of the Georgia Tech. You can't, not to be, biased, but also Emory and SCAD with their kind of art department, really there's amazing talent coming out of Georgia State as well, with 34,000 students there, and all just in such a quick and easy proximity.
Well, it's a great story, and it's one that's still building. Our third presenter is Andrew Somoza. He's the president of UBAC, a company that makes charitable giving simple, smart, and secure for companies, donors, and nonprofits. He's a technology entrepreneur with 20+ years of experience in leading successful early stage organizations. Having co-founded a number of technology companies, Andrew has amassed all the skills necessary to bring a business from concept to exit. He is now advancing a really interesting company, UBAC. You ought to take a look at their website because it is a great addition now to charitable giving. But he holds a master's degree in management or a bachelor's degree in management from Georgia Tech. He also, though, maintains a portfolio of investments reflecting his broader interests, including a partnership that now operates the Variety Playhouse in Atlanta, the Georgia Theater in Athens, and other venues. And so Andrew is vested in this community, and we asked him here. He's a classic serial entrepreneur with extensive experience in creating technology. So Andrew, tell us a little bit about the type of people that work in your field and the value that they place on culture and quality of life in their lifestyles.
Sure, thanks for the question. It's funny, Aileen.
Yes,
Aileen, okay, let's make it sure. Aileen might bring up great points. Spending a lot of time at Georgia Tech, my wife and I both graduated from Tech. I was a baseball player at Tech, so we endowed a scholarship back to Tech and spent a lot of time there. I think the challenge a lot of our students had graduating from Tech even today is the early stage of the dot-com companies, if you will, the opportunities weren't in Atlanta. It was before we started the company in 2004 and grew it and then sold it, but there's a lot of companies that trade in the $30 to $50 million exit range that aren't as big as the Silicon Valley or the Northeast or the Bostons of the world. And a lot of these guys and gals that are coming out of Georgia Tech or some of these other schools, they take those jobs out west or up north, and we're losing. So it's good to hear you say 72% want to come. When I taught a class at Tech the other day, and we're great at the bigger companies and having opportunities for those folks, but we didn't have a ton of opportunities for the early stuff. So when I sat down with Jeff the other day, it was about, why am I interested in this area as an entrepreneur? UBAC is a company I'm running today. We put some money into that business, but looking at the talent and the people and what we look for, variety I'll touch on quickly is, I think there's tremendous history in this area, like the Georgia Theater, which we purchased first, and then as a baseball guy, I got involved with a minor league baseball team as well, because I always had a love for baseball. Always wanted to live out my dream playing professional ball. That didn't happen. So long story short, I think there's tremendous talent in the city of Atlanta that wants to stay in the city of Atlanta. And Aileen, I helped one of her colleagues, Lawrence Gillerstad, sit down as kind of an expert witness with a company called RentPath that was in Peachtree Corners, and they were trying to figure out, how do we go attract a lot of the talent? And the answer was, we'll get them to come out to Duluth. And I said, who in the heck wants to drive up Peachtree Industrial to go to Duluth? And their VP of sales was, we're going to outsource this to Des Moines. And I looked at him and said, you're moving to Des Moines, Iowa? And he was shocked by all this conversation, because he wasn't moving to Des Moines. He just thought he would go hire cheap staff. But long story short, I think there's a lot, more and more talent and more opportunity. And Bass Field is an example of something that I think there's a lot of opportunity there. There's a lot of additional opportunity in this area. And I love the study where it shows you start at $9,000 and go up to $140, I think was the number in that area, because I like Pond City. Investing in our portfolio has a couple of dozen technology companies as well, and at my our family portfolio. And we're always looking for what makes the most sense, and whether that's the Atlanta Tech Village or downtown or Midtown or Pond City, they want to work and they want to live, and the millennials want to be and impactful in this area. They want to. I think it's different. My dad and I are vastly different, where he went to work for the same company for 40 years, and the idea of me changing jobs and quitting my job and starting a business with 3 small kids at home was literally, to this day, he's still scratching his head, and we're still trying to get over that relationship. But long story short, today you are going to change jobs. You are going to look for something. And in Aileen's world, I have a commercial real estate company, portfolio company as well. And the main thing is, they want to work where they want to be part of a environment that influences and encourages the entrepreneurial spirit. So you won't put a startup in the bottom of a Southern Company building, if you will. You're going to put them somewhere else that fits likely more appropriate. So the direct question, the talent is here. The talent wants to stay here. The millennial talent is in this area. And I'm recruiting and looking, and even when I hired somebody that just moved in for UBAC from Greensboro, his first question was, I want to be able to walk to work. Where's the business going to be in Atlanta? And our business, UBAC, is at the ATDC right in Midtown. Selfishly, as somebody mentioned earlier, the CEO wants to be close to his home, and he wants to be close to Georgia Tech. So selfishly, I wasn't going about any further than about 3 miles for the business. But they're here, and they want to stay here. And I think this area has tremendous opportunity. Variety is because we love variety, we love music, and we love the opportunity there. But the rich history of this area in blending all different types of people is a great, again, selfishly, I like the Bass Field area as I'm talking to different folks, because there's still a lot of growth in this area.
And as we keep on hearing people talk about culture, Mike, do you have any data on the impact of culture on economic growth? Is there a direct relationship between investments in cultural institutions and seeing a payback in economic growth in the community?
No, that's not the question you gave me.
Well, it's kind of like that.
You mixed it up. I had this whole
you
joke
didn't
ready.
answer
I'm
the
like, I was
question
in the
I asked
Marines.
you.
I don't know anything about culture. I couldn't know less about it. But it is, for the ARC, such a big part of our work now. About 5 years ago, we took on the responsibility for regional arts coordination and planning, and it's been very interesting for us. And of course, we took our data resources and started to help places like the Fox Theater, different arts organizations to understand their patron sheds. I'd never made a patron shed map before, but we started to really recognize how under-resourced they were at understanding even their own markets. Things that we truthfully do very easily was, it was like Star Wars to them, and we were very excited to do it and learn more about that. And as we did that, we really went on our own journey of learning about what that relationship really means. 4 years ago, I was at a conference in Philadelphia and I got to hear Jane Golden talk about the mural arts program in Philadelphia. And they have something like 2,300 murals in Philadelphia. And if you ever go back to Philadelphia, all you will see is the murals. And she really lit me on fire. And my boss, Doug Hooker, who is a genius of the world at understanding the power of that, has really pushed that. And so if you look at the MLK station now, what do you see? Well, we took our link trip to Philadelphia, and they were so enthusiastic after Jane made a presentation to the regional leaders of Metro Atlanta that they immediately funded an arts program. And so we have funded 4 mural projects with the money that we raised. Truthfully, we overspent the money, and that budget's still in the negative. So at some point, I'm gonna have to clean that up. If somebody wants to make a donation, that would be nice. But we're really doing a kickoff ceremony Sunday from 4 to 6 over in Decatur for the mural that's on the MARTA line there. Because we do know that that's a very powerful part of the future mix. And I don't want to demean it by saying it's important for economic development. I think it's important for its own right. Art should be a part of the social fabric and community. We totally get that now at the ARC. But there is also an economic development benefit. Can we measure it exactly? No. But do we know now in Metro Atlanta the areas that do this very well seem to be the places that are succeeding? There is a reason why the Beltline, we can see 2 million. Is it really 2
Yeah,
million
it's 2
people? I've been
million
trying to
last
get
year.
probe data on that to get an exact
But I do
count.
think to that point, there's everyone wants to know the special sauce and what, but it's really a feeling. It's why someone likes or is attracted to a place or feels like, the overused authentic. But if you have an office
Right.
owner that tries to make a new building look and feel old with, some tricks, that also comes through, that it's inauthentic and it doesn't feel as good as when you're in the food hall on City Market.
It's funny you say that. So, anybody work for Coca-Cola here? So I'm not being taped or recorded. So we went and spoke at, on that same note, we went and spoke at Coca-Cola years ago, and it was an entrepreneurial area of their building, which I didn't even know that existed at Coca-Cola. And you walk in, they have a lot of whiteboards of people with their shirts untucked and trying to be an entrepreneur, if you will, in the startup world. And then I asked the question, do you ever walk across the streets of Georgia Tech and just bring somebody over for the summer and pay them $12 an hour and let them start on Monday? And the lady said, oh, absolutely not. We'd have to post that job and it would take 6 months. And I said, well, then you're really not entrepreneurial, right? It takes that long. That's the bureaucracy of big business that you miss. But there's so many opportunities that people want to do it. Like, I mean, I've consulted or worked with big companies that are trying to figure out this data and how to bring in somebody that is conditioned to be a startup guy or a gal, but would maybe take a job at Coke or at SunTrust or somewhere if they felt like they had their entrepreneurial spirit heard, if you will.
So that's actually a great point. There's a movement now at the mega scale of Coke, and it's basically like anchor capital investment in startups. And a lot of these big companies now have programs for that. Home Depot, they all do it because they know these younger, really talented people do not want to get into the grind of a corporation, but so they're using their money to seed these startups.
Or Techstars.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
Techstars
Techstars
is
is the
in,
big one.
that's at Pond City Market. It's, the lease is actually with Cox, and
I was there last week.
yeah, I mean, so all those smaller companies that they accept, whatever they design and produce could be aligned with Cox and could be easily purchased. And Nike does one with, if you're, moisture wicking fabric or all, more in line with something that they would be purchasing.
But the point of Metro Atlanta is we really do have this unbelievably large corporate footprint, and they really weren't at the kind of small scale of local communities interacting. Even at a business scale, it was they should be drawing more local businesses into their work.
Well, and I would also say economic development. I mean, hats off, they've been doing an amazing job, and they work well together. So if it's Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce or Georgia Power, they really have a good cohesive group when they're trying to get these companies to relocate. But Georgia Tech has been able to integrate with kind of the business community much better than some of the equal type of universities or educators in other cities.
Where's Techstars located?
I know, I thought City Market.
Right, and that's the kind of space that that kind of activity wants to be in. They don't want to be in the standard corporate space.
People got some questions out in the audience.
I have a question. This relates to an early concern we had when we were working on Pond City Market, and I was with Green Street Properties, which is part of Jamestown at the time, and with these wonderful, what was the example you used at Venice Beach, where they have ping pong tables and they're sort of building in the internal culture. The concern that we had was that Athena Healthcare was building out this fantastic dining facility and trying to be very insular. And we worried that they weren't going to go down into the food hall and actually be patrons. And certainly in the little Five Points environment, as Scott says, one of the things that could happen is you add 8 hours to that market day potentially. And I'm just curious if there's an experience here on the panel in how to sort of ensure that that doesn't happen. You want to create that environment that's a cradle for this type of tech worker. At the same time, you want them to integrate with the world around their space.
Yeah, I think there's a few good examples and some maybe that we didn't get perfect when they first were developed, but have been tweaked and improved greatly. So, I mean, Avalon just finished their first complete building, so they're moving on to their second. So if you're talking very suburban, but infill, I mean, people wanting to live by the action and the great restaurants and North American procuring good, midtown restaurants to move up to Alpharetta to have that opportunity for people that live in Alpharetta as well. But Atlantic Station would be another. I mean, again and again, just having that mass of people that aren't just going to continue to eat at the cafe in their 500,000 square foot building. They want to check off their to-do list during the day and not leave it for Saturday afternoon.
Other questions? Well, I really appreciate the great brain power and talent that we've been able to attract here today. I hope that everybody learned a little bit about the Moreland Corridor, since we were talking about Pond City Market, and hopefully a future that we can have in this area. Again, the study is evolving on l5pcid.com. We invite your input and suggestions to it. I want to thank Lisa Adler and Horizon Theater, who are our hosts tonight. It's a great cultural institution here, an anchor really in the Little Five Points area, and is one of the institutions that make this area what it is. Thanks to Andrew, thanks to Aileen, and thanks to Mike for your insights on these items. And Mike, thanks to ARC for sponsoring this process and keeping it going not only here for the Moreland Corridor and in town, but really across the region, because ARC's great reach seeks to develop livable places throughout the entire region, and I think that they've done a great job. We heard about Alpharetta. That's every place in the region is starting to urbanize, but what we'd like to believe is that there is an inherent vintage to this area that is really hard to replicate elsewhere, and that will continue to give this area a major advantage and opportunities that are hard to get. So if there is please.
Do we have time for one?
Chris, yeah, please do.
It might be a good wrap up. You and Scott made some really good points on such an insightful and, I guess, really inspiring presentation. Who knew our area had such potential, right? Diamond in the rough. Is there anything in there that any of you three saw that you really just pull out and highlight and say, this one, go after this one, or some first steps that you might suggest for some of the initiatives that we were talking about? Anything come to mind?
We have
Yeah, I mean, again, mine is a selfish interest because I watched the Marshall Tucker Band try to pull their tour bus into behind Variety Playhouse the other night, and I laughed and said, that guy's the greatest driver I've ever seen. I mean, it literally had about that much room and eventually made it. So I look at that parking behind, and every time we come over for a show, I try to decide, am I taking Uber or am I gonna drive because there's nowhere to park? So I think for mine is the gaps in the buildings are number one. Number two, being an entrepreneur and a guy who likes to fund early stage businesses, I recognize there's things I love about Pond City Market, and there's things as an entrepreneur that $500, I mean, $50 from a startup world that couldn't be on my.
Right,
It's-
it can't be.
Couldn't fit. Fits for MailChimp, fits for Google.
Works for Cox.
Works for Cox. And Michael got some money from those. I mean, that's a different, but there's some areas that I think there's some, I selfishly look at, again, what's behind Variety Playhouse, that the red, right? That's the area of opportunity. And then,
I'm behind Variety.
okay. And then Bass Field, what that looks like. That's what gets me excited. And I think, again, you have Pond City, for the early stage stuff. You have the ATV, you have ATDC, and some of these other incubator areas. I think that there's still tons of room for additional companies that when they want to grow up. ATDC, where I am now, after about 6 or 10 employees, you have to leave the nest, as I call it, and then you have to go find a space. But I sure as heck don't want to just find a space in an office building, no offense to the Avalon or Galleria or somewhere. I want to go to, again, where companies, just like what I experienced, I just happen to be a little bit bigger. You know, I'm 50 employees, not 10. And I think there's some challenges of taking that when they push you out of the nest. That's what I told David Cummings at ATV, is when you leave that environment and you love it and you want to continue on that environment, there's not that's the minor leagues, if you will, and now you want to go to the major leagues where you have a whole new set of problems, but you want to stay in that same learning environment. And I think that's where I look at, again, selfishly, Bassfield, is could you put something in that area either to help with variety parking, or could you put something in Bass that would attract the additional entrepreneurs that are still in this area, the money that's in this area. I think that's the other thing that we may not have touched on. There is a lot of money that is looking at now investing in no longer a startup as the term, as an early stage technology company where they know they can put some money to work and pretty good returns that are different than giving your money to your broker and doing whatever.
Yeah, I think there's a little misnomer that like it's all tech. That I mean, the point is that if you do pay over $50, you're obviously established and you're in the major leagues at that point. So I think the organic type of office actually did start because of they needed to keep their costs down. And those offerings are fewer and farther between in Midtown while, you know, we're all kind of prospering and as Midtown is taking off. And, you know, that's why you saw the Biltmore get purchased by Georgia Tech Foundation, because that was kind of a defensive move on their part to keep some office available for these teenage type, you know, not the very incubated firms that were, you know, right on campus, but while they moved and grew in the continuum, that they would have a place to go that was close to campus. And then construction prices kind of can't, you know, you can't go without talking about them. Just they're at the highest they've ever been. Atlanta hasn't built new product, even though the demand seems to be there. You know, 725 Ponce is going spec. You'll see Atlantic Yards probably go spec, which with Invesco kind of behind that on the west side, so with Hines developing that. But those, you know, you're gonna have to see some pretty stout rental rates to justify new construction. So that's not gonna be that organic continuum or smaller type firm going into those.
Yeah, I know the office market's still kind of upside down on the pricing structure, and parking's a big part of that.
Yeah, every conversation of real estate doesn't even start with square footage, it starts with parking. I mean, it's really, really unbelievable.
So, as it relates to this area, that's still a conversation I think you need to have, but for us regionally, we've got to get to a place where we're building buildings vertically that don't have parking. We have a train system. We can make multifamily affordable if we can let go of that in certain areas. And office, but can you imagine it's a very different
I mean, it's
world.
amazing because I always, you know, people look at New York or Boston and it's like, oh, if we could only give up our car. And like, people didn't modify their behavior because they wanted to get out of their car. They did it because it cost $15 to get across the George Washington Bridge every day each way, and there's only 6 parking spots in their building. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
I
1,500
actually, when
lumber.
85 collapsed, thought this could be the shot in the arm that Atlanta needed, and people are gonna really start changing their behavior and seeing that there's other opportunities.
There's one other thing I wanna say, and it's about your Sugar Creek Trail. I can tell you, what was the term you used, Scott, for the,
Fuses.
the fuses? He makes this stuff up, and then it'll stick and it'll become part of the planning stuff, so, lexicon. We are racing to coordinate with our local governments, an integrated trail network for metropolitan Atlanta. We are truthfully trying to build a separate system that is absolutely separated from the car. I think it will be some of the best work that we have ever done at the ARC. It will be something that we are driven to do for the next 10 years. I can't tell you how important I think this is for the economic growth potential of the region. A trail now is a new golf course, whatever funny, term you want to come up with. But it's at a scale that local governments can grapple with it. Sandy Springs can't rebuild 285, but they can run a trail down to the Path 400 trail that will eventually come down and link up and go north to the Silver Comet Trail and to the path trails over here. So y'all should just hold on to your hat, because I think that's going to be really interesting. Everything you can do to support the continuation and development of that trail system, from the SPLOST project list to additional work that I think the CID and the communities here can do, is going to be such a benefit, because Scott is absolutely right. And this is the worst part of the 85 collapses. I spent the last 3 weeks looking at real-time probe data to try to figure out how we can help the city, and to a lesser degree, GDOT, because we've got some special resources. Moreland at Ponce is that place. He's absolutely right. GDOT, RTOP, beautiful, beautiful signal timing on the system. You're absolutely right. If you ever wait on Moreland, it's because there are people looking at you, managing that signal timing to make sure it flows as quickly as possible. But when it goes up to Ponce, game over, right? That's one of those places, and they call it flushing when they clear a network now, because they can reset all the signal timing on this corridor with a click of a button, and it's really amazing. But his point is the point that has to be made. We are not going to change Moreland. There's going to be a ton of traffic on it. We've got to find better ways to travel. And so I just want to hit that point home, and I don't mean to be preachy, but I'm learning the hard way looking at NREX probe data that Moreland is one of the worst performing links in the whole system with 85 down, because so many people are trying to get up to Emory that otherwise might have used 85 and gone around. So be aware of that. You see it as you live here and know that, but it's been interesting to watch that. Trails, people.
There was one last question over here.
Is there any chance new roads may have to be built to increase the access to areas like Pond City Market and things like that?
That's not in anybody's planning document.
Good.
Isn't the North Avenue corridor getting all sorts
So,
it's getting to be
Yeah,
on
the North
top.
Avenue is actually a
North
smart
Ave-
corridor
Yeah.
where we're gonna try to do some different things. But if you go to the Connect Atlanta plan, which is the current plan, and the city's updating their transportation plan with funding that,
We're here this
we
morning.
provide to communities of that scale. You should be a part of that process as well when it gets rolling, but there's no current plans.
They were here this morning.
Oh, they were? Okay, so.
Yeah, but they were talking a lot about innovative transit, not just bikes and paths. Is there any innovative transit going on, anything happening related to transit other than adding bus lines or, anything around smart cars or small mode transportation, moving
So,
from place to place?
we're, I think, very much interested in autonomous vehicles. Early last week, I was with city staff, GDOT, doing panels with GM and Ford. They are keen to go to select communities and test different models of the way that they know their businesses are gonna have to change. The ownership structure on cars is going to give way. If you haven't checked out Clutch or Maven, you can just basically lease a car through an app now. So as they autonomous vehicles, ride sharing, not owning a car, those are going to be a part of the future. We're hoping transit becomes a part of an integrated mobility solution, and that's what we're really talking about, is integrated mobility. Lyft to MARTA, MARTA long haul to Lyft, and truthfully, I'm even doing that in my personal life. Because of 85 collapsing, I can't pick my daughter up in Chamblee at school. I'm putting her on Lyft to the Chamblee MARTA station and picking her up at Eastlake. And she loves it. She thinks it's good people watching. But what I'm trying to do is create a MARTA user because we've got to do some things differently. And I know the city, as a staff, the elected officials, they're very interested in making sure that they're evaluating and at that leading edge now. And that's what
Yeah,
that
I mean,
corridor
I
is all
think
about.
the corridor is really interesting. We're seeing a lot of, like there's a valet firm that's not in Atlanta, but in Austin, which really, if you think we have a parking problem. So you go to your office building and then you hit the valet and someone comes and takes your car and you don't really worry about where they park it, but then when you're leaving, you hit it again and they bring it back to you. So kind of the reverse of an Uber, so you don't have to worry about the parking.
Right, and that's the point, is these companies are racing to figure this stuff out. They're experimenting.
Yeah,
Right.
actually Coke, you know, to give a little credit to Coke, they did a car pooling app within the firm, and they're getting, like, being able to reimburse each other for gas and getting people in this car commuting together and getting to know each other, and obviously more engaged employees are more productive, and it's all been a positive experiment with their rideshare.
Yeah, there's a number of startups right now that are using Uber or Lyft as part of their incentive to their employees to say, instead of parking here and that's time to
Cardalytics
pay.
and
Yeah.
MailChimp both use.
Yeah, instead of sales law, they're all
Yeah.
using the codes to figure out
Yep.
how to do that. So,
Yeah, I think it'll have a big impact on commercial marketing. I'll be honest with you, I do go to Variety a lot. It's one of my favorite places in Atlanta.
It is
But
great.
if it's kind of late and I don't want to take the train and walk down the hill, which y'all should really improve the pedestrian access down the Inman Park train station, you still got to kind of jump down at the tree to walk up. I know, I know. I'm not messing around. But if I can Uber pool back to Oakhurst for $2.80, I'm not parking. The parking's already too expensive. So, yeah.
Mike, I've seen DOT getting better over the last several years in terms of thinking outside of just the car, but they're still a slow moving beast. And thinking about Moreland and how, you know, what Scott said is we're not gonna make it really, not a car corridor. But think about Bassfield redevelopment and getting across Moreland as an example. How do you play with DOT to figure out a way to get pedestrians across Moreland from one side to the other, whether it be a bridge or a tunnel or a hawk signal? And
Yeah.
how can ARC have the oomph to help us get there with DOT?
That's a good question. I don't think I have the perfect answer. I do want to say I think GDOT has been very receptive. I think GDOT right now, if you have something and you're very focused on that something, and they know that that's the thing you're focused on, they will be with you. If you come at them with 20 things, right, that's where they have been, I think, a little bit overwhelmed, and they are overwhelmed. They've got a lot going on. And of course, I think it really begins with the city staff as well. GDOT, the city, and ARC, I think the partnerships are great right now, but you're gonna want the city to really buy into that as well, so that it's a unified front, and you know what you want, and you've got good, you know, planning, data, and engineering behind the solution. Because, you know, they're not opposed to good pedestrian crossings. They like doing that kind of work. They feel a little built up. They have good stories now, and I mean some people that I work with specifically, where they've gone out on a limb and they really got chopped up pretty good. Ask them about bicycle lanes on Peachtree. You know, and they I think rightfully felt like they were left hanging in that situation. So you know, once you go in, you need to be with them on that, but you've got to make sure you know what you want.
All right, it's 8 o'clock, and I want to thank again our panelists.